Thank you very much, Mr. Betts, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and Happy New Year to you and everybody else who's here this morning. This is a 90-minute debate, and I've said to quite a number of people that I could easily speak for at least 90 minutes on this topic. Now, it'll be a relief to all of you that I'm not going to do that. But the reason is it's a source of huge frustration in my constituency. Owning a new home, the development of new homes should be a source of great joy. But actually, too often, it's a source of great distress. And there are a few reasons for that I want to talk about. But before I go into those, I do want to say at the outset that contrary to some of the media stereotypes about an area like mine, most people in my constituency aren't opposed to new homes. If they're homeowners themselves, they entirely understand why other people want to own a home. They often have children and grandchildren that they're trying to help get on the housing ladder. They know we need housing for key workers. They know that sometimes people just want to move into one of these new homes from where they already live in the constituency. But it's the way that these things are developing and the way in which they're causing problems in the local area that people have real frustration with. Now, the first issue is simply the quality of a lot of the homes that goes up, because it's often poor. Sometimes it's very good, but too often it's poor, with major defects that constituents are having that are taking years. I've got constituents who've spent 2, 3, 4 years trying to get, sometimes more, trying to get these defects repaired. And this is not like buying a cheap version of something on eBay and, half expecting there might be something wrong with it. This is the biggest purchase any of us will make, and you do not expect to then have years of trying to sort out the problems with it. And unfortunately, the process by which constituents are trying to do this, they feel completely outmatched by the builder who built it. Sometimes they'll blame the contractor. Sometimes they'll say there's nothing wrong. We signed it off according to building regulations. But I've been in some of these places. You can see these huge issues, and it's completely unacceptable that people are experiencing these. The second issue is about the impact of these homes on the environment. Now, that has two major aspects to it. One is what it does to the local environment around that area. So quite naturally, people can see greenfield sites disappearing. They know that often, I had one constituent write to me who said that, the biodiversity commitments that this particular house builder made have not been kept whatsoever. It has an impact on air quality, it has an impact on water quality, but it's also how the homes are built themselves. I am continually asked by constituents, why are we building so many homes we know we've got to retrofit in a few years? And there's not an easy answer to that. I'm continually asked, why can't every new home have solar panels? Why can't every new home have heat pumps? Now, I understand why. There are various reasons why you may not put the same thing in every kind of house. I completely welcome the government's commitment on having electric charging points in every new home. I really, really welcome the Future Homes Standard that will make new homes from 2025 net zero ready with a 75% reduction in their emissions. But the point still stands that thousands of homes are going up right now, and we know, because of the ambitious net zero goals we have, we're going to have to retrofit a lot of how they're being built. And the reason is because it's cheaper for the house builders to build them in that way today. The third aspect is about affordability. Now, I've said a few times in this place, no one who rents has ever said to me there are too many new homes going up. They only say they're not affordable. They say they've saved for years and years, and it doesn't matter how often they save, they don't get close enough to being able to afford one. Now, the average house price in my constituency is 335,000. To London ears, that might sound fine, but it's 9.2 times median income. It's out of the reach of most people. An affordability threshold, which is 80% of that, still isn't affordable. And again, we run into bad practices here because we all know that what happens is these developments have a certain number of affordable homes committed to, and this is driven down time after time after time after time on the grounds that the development wouldn't be viable to maintain that promise. And broken promises are a constant theme in this area, that the development wouldn't be viable if you kept to that number of affordable homes. Everybody knows their role in that game. I will give way.
Speech and a particularly important point on affordable housing. what I'm often told is that the developers, when they make these arguments about viability, are working on a 20% profit margin per property. Does he agree with me that is completely unsustainable?
David Johnson.
I think the Honourable Member makes a very important point. The point I was just about to make is that when the taxpayer is subsidising the development of affordable homes, and when the profits of our large house builders are so large, actually often bordering 30%, come rain or shine, because they're making these profits in all weathers at the moment, it's completely unacceptable for them to play this game time after time so that people are unable to get on the housing ladder. The fourth aspect I wanted to talk about is the role of management companies, because actually with the purchase of the home, the costs for the people in these new homes often don't stop. They're often signed up to really quite expensive contracts with management companies who purport to provide services to maintain communal areas. And it's often very, very difficult for the people in these homes to find out what all is being done for this money. They see the charge go up year after year, but they see that their communal area isn't being maintained. They're told there are staff that are employed to do things. They never see these staff. They work hard to try and get some transparency as to what is being provided for this money, and they can't get it. They can get a basic summary, that's about it. And these are often very qualified people trying to get this information, and they can't do so. And I have a particular management company at the moment where the residents don't want me to name them, and I won't yet, but where the residents are, they're often elderly, they're often sick, they're often vulnerable, and they feel completely bullied and exploited by their management company. And right now they're being pressured into taking a new lease, which they don't want to take because they know it's going to be bad for them, but they fear the repercussions if they don't. And they also fear the repercussions if they go to someone to talk about it. I mean, they've done so with me, but as you can hear, they don't want me to talk about who they are. This is an appalling situation for people to be in. And far too often, there is a real problem with the way in which these management companies are fleecing the people in these new homes when they've already spent as much money as they have. And then the fifth aspect I wanted to yes, we'll give way.
Bring this forward. One of the things that prior to preparation for this debate and looking into the matter was leasehold in the United Kingdom and UK and England and Wales and Scotland. People are unable to buy their leasehold, but in Northern Ireland, it's one part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain that you can. Does the Honourable Gentleman feel that when it comes to purchase of freehold, instead of making it a freehold, which is what happens in England, Wales and Scotland, and Northern Ireland have a chance to buy it out, does he feel that perhaps that should be something that should happen here in the mainland as well?
I thank the Honourable Member for that point, and I completely agree with him, and I expect the Minister will address that point when he talks about it, because I agree, most people think they're then owning that home, and in fact they can end up too often feeling just like tenants with costs. I mean, I had this myself until quite recently. I used to get a bill for £300 on Christmas Day every year. It was billed 25th of December, £300 for absolutely nothing, precisely because I was in that situation. But, you know, constituents of mine are in a much worse scenario. The fifth aspect I wanted to talk about, though, is the overall sort of broken process, broken system that this operates in. Now, I don't blame government entirely for all of this. I think councils have some responsibilities here when they they don't enforce their planning conditions, if they go above the assessed numbers that they're supposed to be built in, when they allow the same application over and over again when they could refuse it after 2 times. They don't take a bigger picture view. So I've got villages like Sutton Courtly in my constituency which feel hugely overdeveloped because what's happening is the individual applications are all being approved and nobody is looking at what's happening to the whole area and why it might not be a good idea to keep approving those. And ultimately, I think these companies have to be held accountable for their behaviour, for the fact that they will apply to sites that they know are not in the local plan for them to apply to, as is happening in Grove in my constituency at the moment. They will continually try and build on floodplains. They continually fail to adhere to their Section 106 and SIL agreements, sometimes not building the infrastructure at all, sometimes building pointless community things like a pathway that only goes halfway across the estate, or a bike path that leads to nowhere, just so they can say that they've done it. And you have all this sort of thing going on with the new developments in my constituency. So I don't blame government for it all, but I do think it's government's job to try and make sure the system doesn't operate in this way. If you had to sum up a lot of the problems in my constituency, it would be too many homes, too little infrastructure, because the 2 district councils that I cover, relative to their size, are in the top 10 areas for house building in the country. Yet they're both in the bottom third for infrastructure spending. And this is a huge bugbear, because to put this in sort of numerical context, when an estimate was done of what the population changes were going to be between 2017 and 2027, the largest town and surrounding area in my constituency, Didcot, is going to go from 36,000 to 51,000. The second largest area, Wantage and Grove, is going to go from 17,000 to 27,000. This is in a 10-year period. Farringdon's getting thousands more. Wallingford's getting thousands more. And the infrastructure isn't following with this. So it's harder to get a GP appointment. Your roads get, the roads in the constituency get more and more congested. It's harder to get a school place. There's one village with 220 child school, and they've built 300 houses right next to it. And so the catchment area just last year became less than 470 metres, and all the people who've lived there for a long time who expected their child to go to that school now can't get into that school. So when my constituents hear that planning reform may mean new houses and they won't be able to oppose them, or the Oxford-Cambridge Arc may mean more houses, or the Oxfordshire 2050 plan that council lead us to may lead to more houses, they're not concerned out of NIMBYism. They're concerned out of the experience that they've had over many, many years of so many houses going in and so many promises being broken. And to conclude, I just want to talk about a few things that I think should happen. There are lots of things, and there are plenty of experts in this room who I know will talk about other aspects to this. But the first is we need a much tougher regime for the quality of these buildings in the first place. Now, I know that the forthcoming Ombudsman will deal with some of these issues. But as I say, it's completely unacceptable to pay that much money and have that many problems. And we need very tight conditions on the quality. This threshold needs to be raised, and if it's not met, fixed within a certain time frame, not go on for years, and there to be penalties if it's not done within that period. The second is, I think we do need use it or lose it planning permissions. Now, I know there are debates about how best you do this, but I'm frequently written to about the 1 million permissions that haven't been built on. I know there's a debate about land banking, whether it happens or not. You'd be hard-pressed to persuade me that it doesn't happen, at least from the developer's point of view. And I do think people should, if they aren't, but we're familiar in this place with the phrase dig a trench, because the emphasis has been on starting the building, i.e. companies then dig a trench to suggest that they've done so, and the houses then take years and years to appear. Actually, we need these completed within a certain period, and again, it might be taxes levied or fines paid if they're not, but I think the permission should be lost entirely if they're not. The third is about the environmental standards. Now, again, I think here, if it's going on for several years without these houses being built, they should be built to what the latest environmental standard is, not the one at the time they got permission. Because again, that's what's happening at the moment. We're building houses, we're not building houses, these companies are building houses to an environmental standard of several years ago, when they should actually be building to a standard of the future. So again, I think this needs to be something that is changed. We've got to make developers and house builders commit to their affordability criteria. Our big house builders are doing completely fine for profits for their own viability, so they cannot keep saying the development wouldn't be viable to commit to what they originally promised. When it comes to management companies, I think, again, we need a much stricter regime here. It's very murky. They are getting away with appalling practices. They're bullying their residents into things. They're they are fleecing them year after year for things they're not providing. So we need a tougher regime for them where they can't keep hiking these charges without an extraordinary set of circumstances. Often these charges are going up because of things this company itself has done and got wrong, and then it's passing the charge on to residents when they had no say in the first place. Much more transparency and penalties for bad behaviour in this way. And then a couple of more things before I finish. First is about I understand that house builders want a level playing field. They don't want to have to commit to, an individual company doesn't want to commit to things which are very expensive if its rivals aren't doing so. And that's where I think the role for government to raise the standards so they've all got to do it is correct. But I also want a more level playing field for smaller building companies like Greencore in my constituency, because these are often much more environmentally friendly, much more efficient, produce higher quality homes, but they're outbid all the time by the financial muscle of the big boys. So perhaps we need to reserve more sites for these as a proportion of the sites that developed. Perhaps we need to give them greater access to capital. But I am all in favour of the smaller organisation rather than the larger one. I ran small charities, not larger ones. I think we can get a better product from smaller house builders. We need to help more of them into the market. And then the final point is this issue of infrastructure. We need it to go in first. It is not right to pile more and more houses, more and more people into an area and do nothing for supporting the services and infrastructure in that area. I've been campaigning to get Grove Station reopened, to get improvements on our roads, to get better medical facilities, because now we have GP surgeries bursting at the seams. You heard those numbers of the thousands more people being added to the area. And we don't have GP surgeries that come along with it, or the number of school places that we need to come along with it. So we need this infrastructure to go in first, because unfortunately, when my constituents are told, well, it will come, they've heard that too many times. They've heard that over decades. The infrastructure is going to come with the houses. It never has. And now they don't believe it. And so we've got to start getting that in first. And as part of that, we might better capture the land value increase that happens when planning permission comes, which all goes to the owner at the moment. Some of that ought to go to the local community. They're the ones who will live with the new houses, not the landowner who's sold the land at the end. In sum, I think the balance of power is wrong. I think the management companies, house builders, developers, they have too much, and local residents have too little. And the government can't be blamed for every single thing a private company does, but it can help to restore the balance so that the local community don't see new houses as a curse on the area they used to love.
Call the Minister now, and if the Minister could just allow a brief period at the end for the mover to wind up, that would be appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Vitz. Pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and congratulations to the Honourable Member for Wantage for securing this debate. I think we can see from the contributions that have been made, this is a topic that promotes passion, shall we say, not just on behalf of the members and right honourable members who've contributed, but also on the part of their constituents. I welcome the Honourable Member for Greenwich and Woolwich to his place. Wish him a happy new year, but not too successful a new year, obviously. And with regard to future planned legislation, particularly with regard to leasehold reform, I look forward to discussing with him and other members to ensure that we get that legislation in a good place before it's brought forward. Now, I understand how important it is that infrastructure comes with new housing. Indeed, the Honourable Member for Wantage is a one-man campaign machine when it comes to working to ensure that he secures infrastructure for his constituents when it comes with housing. As he says, they're not NIMBYs, they just understand that it's not just houses, it's the infrastructure they require. Now, Section 106 agreements of around £1 billion were agreed towards infrastructure in 2018-19. These include contributions to transport, open spaces, the environment, education and medical facilities. The Community Infrastructure Levy also allows local authorities to obtain the funds needed to deliver infrastructure such as roads, schools, health facilities and flood defences. Currently, around 50% of local authority charge CIL which has estimated that the liability for new planning permissions amounting to roughly £1 billion from 2018-19. Now, the Housing Infrastructure Fund also provides £4.3 billion to put improved transport connectivity, healthcare services and other infrastructure in place before housing is built. We already made changes to reduce the renegotiation of affordable housing and infrastructure commitments made through Section 106 agreements. To reduce the renegotiation, the government requires local authorities to have clear policy requirements in their local plans. This means that landholders and site purchasers are aware of likely costs up front and can take this into consideration when agreeing land transactions. The government has also set out clear guidance on how viability assessments should be undertaken and made public to ensure that there is consistency and transparency in this approach. However, the government recognises that the existing system of developer contributions can sometimes be costly and complex, which can delay developments and reduce certainty for communities. That is why we're exploring the introduction of a new infrastructure levy to replace the current system of developer contributions. This levy will seek to deliver at least as much value and on-site affordable housing as at present. We're proposing to make the levy non-negotiable as a charge on a fixed proportion of the development value to reduce the renegotiation issues that Section 106 agreements are prone to. So our intention is that the proceeds from the levy will be collected and spent locally and would provide flexibility for councils with regard to how they are spent. Now, on planning reforms, unfortunately I have not much to add at the moment. Our Secretary of State took control of the department, the newly empowered department, in September, and clearly has an awful lot of things in his in-tray that he is working through. But the Secretary of State is committed to both looking at planning reform while also fulfilling the government's levelling up ambitions, carefully considering what reforms are needed to the system and how best to take those forward. An announcement will be made in due course.
On that point,
I will, of course, give way.
I thank the Minister for giving way. Disappointingly, if he can't give us any timings on the planning bill, because some of us would like to know when it's coming before we retire, he's had 10 very good backbench contributions this morning. It's been a very good debate, Mr. Betts. All of them, one way or another, highly critical of the house building industry in this country. When will the government support a competition and markets inquiry into the UK house building industry, please?
Well, as set out, the government is already working very closely with the CMA in order to push forward their ambitions, and clearly there's some court cases going on at the moment, so it would probably be inappropriate to comment, except to say we are enthusiastic to support. And I'd just like to put on record the Secretary of State did read the Honourable Gentleman's book over Christmas, and I think has got in touch with him to say how good a read it was.
He has, but I was told I couldn't plug it in the debate.
Just very briefly then, I'm going to run out of time. So with regard to net zero, clearly a number of people have highlighted the point that we need to ensure that we're building homes that are as environmentally sound and low carbon in their production as possible. And people have concerned about the transition to the new legislation. Now, we introduced a Part L uplift, Building Regulations Part L, in order to improve the energy efficiency of homes just before Christmas. Now, in order for a developer to make use of the transitional arrangements that exist, they must have submitted an initial notice, a building notice or full planning application to the local authority prior to the new regulations coming into effect in June 2022. They must then have commenced work on an individual building they want to apply the previous standards to before June 2023. Now, members referred to the idea of digging a trench in order to have started work on site, but we are going to be more stringent with the application of this, and it would be things like having started the foundations for the actual building in order for the previous regs to apply. So those transitional arrangements mean that developers can no longer build out-of-date energy standards over several years as sites are developed. Unless the construction of building has actually commenced, they will need to build to current regulations. And a full technical consultation with regard to the future home standard is planned for spring 2023, and as part of this we'll consider what transitional arrangements are appropriate for that legislation. Now, several members have mentioned management companies and their bad practice in many cases. Put simply, the current situation is unfair to freeholders, and we are committed to introducing legislation to right this wrong. We intend to create a new statutory regime for freeholders based on the rights enjoyed by leaseholders. This would ensure that maintenance charges must be reasonably incurred, and the services provided are of an acceptable standard and include a right to challenge the reasonableness of the charges at a property tribunal. Our ambition is for freeholders to have a right to change the provider of maintenance services by applying to the tribunal to appoint a new manager. This may be especially helpful for freeholders dissatisfied with the services they are currently receiving. Government intends to bring forward legislation to implement those changes as soon as parliamentary time allows. And the build-out rate has also been raised. The government is clear that new homes should be built out as soon as possible once planning permission is granted. Sir Oliver Letwin's independent review of build-out rates found no evidence that speculative land banking is part of the business model of major house builders, nor that it's a driver of slow build-out rates. Nonetheless, noting that build-out is important to communities, we're exploring further options, and in our Planning for the Future white paper that was referenced earlier, we've been clear that we will be exploring those further options to support faster build-out rates as part of our proposed planning reform. I just wanted to say, with regard to the honourable members for Keighley and Halifax and the concern that they raised about Harran Homes, I would be very happy to meet with them to discuss the concerns that they've got and see if there's anything that we can advise. Obviously, we can't intervene in particular cases, but there might be some advice that we can give. And with regard to the Building Safety Bill, again, Secretary of State is working very closely with Lord Greenhalgh in order to see what else can be done, and I would hope that an announcement will be made in the not-too-distant future. So, in conclusion, Mr Betts, I just wanted to say, excellent debate, very grateful for the opportunity to contribute and respond to it, and I look forward to bumping into members around the corridor to discuss some of the issues that they have raised during the course of the debate.
David Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr Betts, and can I thank the Shadow Minister and Minister for their comments. I think there's a lot of agreement there beyond the natural party political arguments. A constituent said to me that buying a new home had been a terrible experience and one they wouldn't repeat. And that is an indictment of how the current system operates. I think the members for Halifax and for Keighley gave powerful examples of the impact it has on constituents and on their mental health, because this is in their minds at all times. I think the members for Ellesmere Port and Neston and Warwick and Leamington were quite right about the system working in the interests of developers, not local people. And as the member for Ellesmere Port said, what is the incentive to come back and fix it? At the moment, there isn't one with these problems. Members for Chipping, Barton and Stretford and Elmston, I thought they had very interesting ideas about how we might use companies' law and character tests, because actually we all know who the bad companies and individuals are in this area. We shouldn't keep letting them build more and more homes. The member for Rayleigh and Wickford was bang on about near market failure. I've read some of Liam Halligan's work. That million-plus permissions that are existed and not built on, I think he found just 3 companies own 90% of them. If that's not an example of near market failure, I'm not sure what is. The member for Dover Deal was very encouraging about the new code that's forthcoming, but it's pretty clear the scale of the problem if only 4% of homeowners think their developers are meeting the aspects of that code, and one business is changing 40,000 aspects of its practices in order to meet it. One of my local housing association CEOs said to me, they're building something to walk away from, and we're buying something we need to maintain for people to live in for 50 to 100 years. And that's at the core of this problem. I know the minister's worked on this area before he became the minister and is very committed to it. I hope we'll see the full weight of government behind this, because homes should be a sanctuary not a place of great stress, and it's something I continue to keep campaigning on, and I know that other members will too. With that, Mr. Betts, thank you very much for your...